All right, good evening, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. Foundations check-in, August 24th, 2023. I didn't see any questions in the email list, so I just have a couple charts I want to brief. So let me get those knocked out right away. Eugene sent me a reminder of this flashcard I had done once upon a time in the middle of COVID, as we were assembling the guts of a hybrid trading job book. And these were some of the central ideas associated with adult learning. And it seemed like a reasonable time to address them again. They hold up really well. So the first one I'll talk about is just the idea of the levels of learning table. And this comes from the world of adult education. Bloom's taxonomy is used to describe the level of mastery that we're trying to design into a lesson based on what the student is able to do at the end of the lesson to know if we accomplished what it was that we were wanting to do. And the idea behind them is that there is an observable level of mastery. And then we normally budget a certain number of hours or activities for each one of those as we're building the curriculum. Say, hey, I got 20 hours to do things. What skills do I need them to have? What's the level of learning I need them to achieve in each of those? What would I accept as evidence that they have achieved those levels? And then you design your lesson and then your time allocation and your resources around that. So as we were looking at at an idea of a job book, sort of an accountable journal of mastery, of accountability, I took that same idea and said, whoops, what is it that, how does this apply to trading? And this is sort of what we came up with. We had identified something like 75 skills. And so we built a job book which said, hey, if I had these measured levels of mastery as I go, you can think, hey, on skill number 1, I've achieved this level. Skill level 2, this level. So you could have sort of a visual display. So I added a couple things to it for our purposes, but the middle 6 are pretty faithful to the levels that that Bloom has identified, and it's generally well received within the educational community. So the ones I added to were level 0, in which for a particular concept or a skill, hey, I wasn't even aware that that was a thing. I'm just sitting here fat, dumb, and happy, enjoying my life, and everything is fine until you come in with all these extra complications. So level 0 was kind of that. Level 7 I added because this had to do with the whole purpose of learning these skills is really to be able to apply them in a routine way in your life without having to think about them in an extra way. And I said, all right, well, use in life means that I'm comfortable and professional in the way that I'm using them in life, that it's part of my conscious competence, that I'm just doing it at a measurably effective level without having to do anything extra. The intermediate levels here are all things that we think about when we're trying to consciously add skills. And so the general idea was that level 1 knowledge is that you can repeat back the purpose, identity, definition, and components of an idea using the correct terminology. Now, we don't know yet that you know anything beyond that, other than if I said to you, ABC, and then you replied back to me, ABC, then I know that you can repeat it. I just don't know if you know it in your own words. that you've got the song, but I don't know if you know the meaning of it. The next level up is comprehension, in which we then say the student can express the idea comfortably and usefully in your own words. So if I said something like ABC about the max pain range compression idea, and you come back with the language DEF, then I have to evaluate DEF and say, does that seem to have the same deeper meaning and underlying understanding that's contained in the formal instruction of ABC? So if I find those to be equivalent, then I'm permitted to say that, yeah, it looks like you got it, the understanding of it, and we're actually able to internalize it and put it into your frame of reference. So if we had something like expert knowledge over here, and we were trying to communicate this concept, and the way we did it was ABC, and in your comprehension, that idea resonates and you can explain it as DEF, and then we evaluate and say, yeah, those actually mean the same thing or so close that it's, we can now say that the knowledge has been transferred and internalized and it's inside your consciousness. Whereas in the first level, if I say ABC, you say ABC, I don't know that you understand it at any deeper level other than like a parrot. A parrot can replicate the message. So that's what we mean by comprehension, is that you've internalized it. Well, the next level of apply is say, not only have I internalized that thing, and I can now actually put it into action in the world effectively. Maybe I gave you a concept like the NDX as a way to rank order something within a range of performance, somewhere between 0 and 100, and you're able to say, look, I understand how to perform the calculations. I could explain what it is and what we're trying to do with it, and then I could take a stack of symbols at the apply level and take these 5 symbols and then correctly apply the methodology and then come up with a score that was correct for each of those symbols. And I could say which ones are overbought, if that was 20, let's see, which one was oversold, which ones are in the middle. Then I will have been able to perform the procedure and come up with a correct answer through action. So not only could I explain it, I can actually do something. So what we actually draw a distinction between something at the action level, where you're actually putting knowledge into action, whereas we might say this was knowledge. At the analyzed level, not only are we able to apply it, but we can actually do something with it and then add some meaning to it and say, as a result of these things being overbought, I could then come up with an action plan that says, well, so what? They're overbought. What does that mean? Well, I could come up with a plan on how to carry that forward into the next round. And typically, we think of analyze as being something where we have more complexity than just doing basic math, but we're able to actually break things down. We're able to sorry, accidentally pushed the button on my pen and it's doing something weird. So if I have a complex problem, I could take a concept and apply it, and maybe what I have to do is break this thing into pieces, perform that function on each one of those, like multiple symbols, and then come up with an action plan that shows I could actually take complexity apart and then put it back together. So the next, quantum level would be the synthesis and create. In synthesis, what I'm doing is I'm taking different chunks of knowledge, different concepts, and applying it to the world, which is a complex thing. And I can look through each one of these lenses and properly apply the discipline or the concept or whatever. And then I come up with maybe 4 different results, 4 different insights as a result of those 4 pieces. And then I can synthesize that into an integrated, synthesized action plan that takes into account the individual contributions of these concepts and integrates them in a way that seems to properly blend and take into account their relative importance, and that could lead to a synthesized action plan or simply a deeper understanding. So synthesis is really an important level of learning because you're getting to the advanced level where we realize that this complex world is too large for us to completely understand it to every degree in all its nuance and all its dynamism. But that what we're doing is that we're trying to get an approximation of that world into our model, into an integrated plan that should give us a better than random chance of mastering our environment. So synthesis is something where we're pulling things together and coming up with a more detailed plan. God dang it, why does that keep doing that? Finally, this... Oh, no, it's not working. Come on. At the creation level, what we're doing is we say, well, as a result of our earlier excursions, we have a deep understanding and a lot of different tools to help us with understanding this complex world. But as we look at the world and we look at the parts where our knowledge is still fuzzy or incomplete or maybe not simplified enough for our satisfaction, come on. We can actually come up with new ideas to start covering the blind spots. And so we're going beyond the established order. And we're actually, there we go. Fuck. I don't know why it's running amok, but so I have this complex world, and maybe I have enough information with all my different indicators that this much of the world I can synthesize and come up with a workable plan. But in that fucking pin. But over in this part of the world, I don't have anything yet, so I can now, based on my understanding of how the rest of the world works, I can create a new insight or a new body of knowledge. So every one of these 1 through 6 has to do like with additive knowledge at 1 through 5. At 6, we're genuinely creating something beyond just simply rearranging deck chairs. At the level 7 in this little modified levels of learning table, not only are we able to do those things, but we actually are using them routinely as just in the normal natural place. Like I'm moving along through a task, I discover I don't have a tool that I need for that, I can just easily move into the creative mode and come up with something that I can put into practice right away. Well, this whole idea is now connected to this conscious competence model in which at some level down here I have unconscious competence where I'm doing things without even an understanding. That's the level of skill that I have in the world under routine conditions. So when I'm surprised by the world, the way I react without thinking, is a reflection of unconscious competence, that your organism has some amount of competence that it just relies on as best practice without you having to act on it at all. So you would think of that sort of as your instinct. The next level of unconscious incompetence is where you're starting to realize how much you don't know, the areas of shortcomings. You're not sure why you have them that way, but you're really saying, yeah, there's some areas in which I'm not good. You move up the level into conscious incompetence, where you're now trying to actively do things, and you're aware specifically of your shortcomings, and you're trying to work on pieces of that incompetence, that you're trying to do something consciously about the incompetence you have. And then as you get better through training and at focusing, you get conscious competence in that I can now perform those skills when I have my brain engaged and I'm using a checklist and I'm screening out all the other things so I can just concentrate. So you think of that as focus. And then after you add a lot of repetitions, you suddenly can begin to rely on the routine, and now you have achieved some level of unconscious competence until you detect on the next round where that is no longer good enough. So we might do that. The next thing we'll talk about is this over here, where I have the Kolb learning cycle, in which this little cycle of this sequence of activities is related to how I learn from short-term experience and lock that into longer-term learning. Let's see if I can get this to work now. Let's see if this is going to work. So the first thing that happens is a concrete experience in the Kolb learning model, where something surprising gets our attention, that we were operating in unconscious, either some level of competence or incompetence, and then something surprises us and we say, oh wow, that just happened, I wonder what that was, I wonder what that means. And then we move to a period out of direct activity until we start thinking about, hey, what does this thing mean? What can I say as I begin to examine the experience I have? What's going on? And what do I think about it? Once I've added some of that theoretical reflection, where I try to create meaning out of the direct experience, I can then try to put the meaning of that specific event into my larger worldview. Like, I'm just cruising along, something happens, I said, wow, that just happened, I wonder what that means. So I think about it and I'm reflecting on it and say, and maybe I pull it out and really just examine it from multiple points of view. Say, all right, I think I understand what it is. I now place it back into my larger cognitive structure, where I think it fits based on all the other things that I know. And then I conduct some active experimentation to see if my newfound understanding of that thing really does fit in with my larger worldview, my paradigm, if you will, my top-level understanding of how the world works. Well, when Kolb says when you go through that process, you now have completed a cycle of learning that lasts, in that you started with something that got your attention, you thought about it, you thought about how it fits overall, you tested that assumption, it seems to work, we can say, I now have advanced up this little mountain of knowledge, I've added something to it. This is the basis for what we think of as the 4-part learning journal, in which in column 1, I describe the thing in rich detail that happened to me that got my attention. I make some notes on how I think it applies, or what it means. I have a plan for a experimental test on learning, maybe forward testing or back testing or some other check on learning independently, and then I get some data and I can reflect on it. And then as I go through my learning journal, I've now progressed through one cycle of the cold learning. Sometimes the data that we get from a back test or an experiment, which is surprising, then becomes the next aha moment. So what I'm always looking for as I'm conducting, I'm doing routine things routinely in my trading, is that I'm looking for the anomalies. What were the surprising behaviors of price? Or what was the surprising feeling I had? Or if I'm listening to somebody else in their discussion and they say something that surprises me, I'm always looking for those things, because from the aha moments, I actually have the potential to learn something new. So if I have this routine body of knowledge, I'm drawing, and some event happens, I run that through my paradigm and I say, well, this is what I expect is going to happen. And if it behaves the way I would have expected, I'm not surprised, and I'm just continuing to cruise along in my deep understanding of the world. But if something happens that was amazing or surprising, I now have to go back to my routine knowledge and say, what was the shortcoming in my model of the world that allowed me to be surprised? Why did this thing behave in a way that I did not expect? And it is always those aha moments that allow us to go deep into our body of knowledge between the conscious and the unconscious, and to now start going down into the root level of assumptions and conclusions and theories, which give us the basis for expected results based on the things that I assume to be true and that I believe are true, and conclusions I've drawn and theories that I hold. All of those things go into my routine understanding of the world. So when I get surprised, I know that there was something at a deep level that's not quite right, that there's a difference between the world and my understanding of the world, or world prime. There's some difference. So the 4-part learning journal allows me to systematically record those things that are surprising to me. And then I have a process of reflection, testing, experimenting, that allows me to determine what was the significance of that surprising thing. Was it just an anomaly? Was it just a low probability event that I didn't realize was possible and I can just make a minor adjustment? Or was this the gateway to adding some new and important part of my understanding? So when we're going through our little trading cases and I take a trade and I do my plan, prepare, and execute, it's only when I get done with that and I get into the assessment phase that I can go back and take a look at how well did I plan, how well did I prepare, how well did I execute, how well am I assessing, and what is the learning value of the entire trade itself? Is there something in there that I can learn from it? If so, what was surprising? When I go back and look at my trade chart, was there something going on with one of my indicators that I didn't even notice? How could that happen? Why did I not see that on my indicator? So the assessment phase allows us to take advantage of the power of our brain to go through these learning cycles, to discover where we are in this conscious competence model, to understand where we are in the mastery of particular concepts and how it all fits together. And this is part of the reason that we perform the assessment phase, is because now each trade is not only a thing that gets us results in terms of R, it actually now becomes a thing where we can begin to learn as a result of the assessment that we learn, that we perform on the trade. One of the reasons that we want an accountability partner is that is a way to ensure that we go through this kind of analysis and assessment for accountability purposes, that we don't take shortcuts. So that's what I wanted to say about this little chart, which was a reminder of the learning journey that we're on as professionals. That if you think about what it means to be a black belt in martial arts, The first degree black belt simply means that student has gone through the body of knowledge sufficiently and can now be a self-directed student. That you're capable of performing all of these things on your own, determining what it is that you need to work on, figuring out where you are in your body of knowledge and the mastery of all those different skills, and then making a decision on what to study next and how to go about structuring your own training, whether that means you're doing it on your own or with a training partner or whatever. And this is part of our journey of lifelong learning. And so all of this was connected to that hybrid trading job book, which is going to be book number 2 in our series of books. Okay. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Brian, I think you sent me a sample of the Cornell note sheet work that you had done. For the life of me, I couldn't find it, but I just wanted to just say, as a way of systematically organizing our learning, this turns out to be maybe the most powerful learning technology that supports that discussion that I just had. Is that we're going to take a note sheet and organize it in such a way that we can have a blueprint of a learning session or a concept. And so in the admin, and I do this with all my military officers, and they find it to be extraordinarily useful. I actually design all my military classes with this in mind, too. So in the admin area, we just put what was the subject and the length, all the administrative notes. If there was something that preceded this particular lesson that this lesson is building on, so we're on lesson 3 or something, and I needed lesson 1 and 2. There were things that carried over from lesson 1 and 2 that allowed lesson 3 to begin properly prepared. And so this is what, in the context and prep, what the lesson's about, what we're going to be learning, what was the prep work that this is building on, so that I am properly prepared. Then inside the lesson itself, I like to put all of the key words and concepts. So this is just the items of the professional language or concepts. I think the boys also were putting timestamps in here too, so you could see for each one of those, where was that term of art used or where was the concept described. And then inside here, you might also have the time code, but there might have been 5 really important chunks about this lesson, and maybe they are simply related conceptually in a word web, and it doesn't matter what order you go through them, that there is some kind of relationship diagram between the concepts. Or maybe it's something that you have to go in sequence. So they might describe the learning pathway through that particular lesson and include all of the, like concept number 1 might be this, and it's defined, and here's some examples, and here's some words, and so you might have a chunk. Now, in these sections over here on self, system, and markets, we talk about how do these things relate to that broad model of competence where we talk about self, system, and market, where we're trying to find the sweet spot in effective knowledge, where something that the market features that we can apply a systematic view towards that aligns with us allows us really to act on that. So this might be something where you make a so what note and you say, hey, there was something important said about the psychology in here that I want to highlight, and maybe something about the design of systems or strategies, and maybe something that is related to market conditions. So we just have an extra place where we can make a connection to those. At the synthesis level is where you start making notes to yourself and saying, hey, this is how I understand the totality of that lesson and how it really applies to me and my knowledge. So this is really self-oriented and synthesizing your personal takeaways, the most important things for you in that lesson. And then in the action, we have a little space for, these are the things that I've got to do now to make sure that I lock it in. Maybe this is, how do I go from, we had those 7 levels of learning. How do I go, if I assess myself at level 2, what do I have to do to get to level 3? And you might take some notes. And then on your master to-do list, you might then transfer those things and plug that into your prioritized action list, so that when it's time to work on yourself for your personal development, you have something like a prioritized list of what it is to do. And then that to-do list is your master control sheet for all the things that you're learning. So as you go through lessons, you start doing these note sheets, and it sort of documents what it is that you're knowing. And all of those might be contributing things to your to-do list. And then you have one master to-do list on things to work on. So if that's the basic template, here's just a couple, 3 examples that the boys put together from the Foundations course. Here's one that was it's coming from the Foundations boot camp. It's a 20-minute lesson, and the lesson was on the time structure of the daily trading plan. And there were 2 important chunks in that. The first one was, how do I go from closeout of the previous day until I'm ready to trade? And then there's a specific process that I follow and different phases along the way. And there's about a 10 or 12 minute discussion of how I go through that process. And then there's an outline of the trading day in which I go through how do I perform those trading functions in the first 30 minutes, during lunchtime, during the last 30 minutes, and how do I handle these different phases, organizing the work in 30-minute chunks. And then Phil and Griff put together some notes that comment on psychology, on process, and on markets, and a synthesis that talks about a professional mindset and what it takes to be prepared for the next day, and then how to structure the execution of that day. And then their action note to themselves was, probably should do that for themselves, and not only on the daily trade, but maybe on swing trading if you have a weekly process. This note had to do with the ecosystem lesson in Foundations, which was number 3 of 3. And then this one basically expands on the idea plan, prepare, execute, and assess, and then talks about the different components that are in planning, preparing, executing, and assessing, and some ideas on the elements of learning. I talked about a few of those already, what the to-do list is all about, how to align yourself through strategy, operations, and tactics to make sure that you're fully aligned, how to think about the conceptual members of your own team, what kinds of processes and scalability and craft knowledge is there to know. So I really look at all of this block here as the broadest top-level description of all the things that I teach about. And this particular lesson goes into maybe a deeper dive on each one of those. And if we look at the Foundations course itself, it actually addresses all of those elements. And so this is, again, a one-page note on how to approach that knowledge. This one, this next one is a ecosystem 2 out of 3. I was actually unpacking my own mind, that this is how I see my mind at work, that when I'm focused on direct processing, that I am relying on mental models and concepts to organize my problem solving, and that I'm always using at a larger level this environmental frame of actors, forces, structures, and contexts in order to solve problems inside an environmental context using particular bodies of reliable knowledge. And I talk through it in that lesson according to those time steps. And so this ecosystem view of the world is very much a systems thinking approach to problem solving in an environment, and it helps to explain at the fundamental level. That's why it's in foundations. That is how my brain actually is wired. And so when a trade comes along and I'm doing PPE&A and I'm trying to solve the problem of the trade frame, it's really relying on this kind of background knowledge and foundational approach to solving problems. And so this is a one-page note sheet on a foundational lesson. So one of the things that Brian, I was going to say was, in the Foundations Q&A, which this is an example of one of them, every one of those is about a 1 to 1.5 hour discussion that was triggered by a question somebody had about the teaching. So somebody had taken the teachings and said, hey, I'm not really clear, what about this question? And then the answer ended up being something like a 1 to 1.5 hour discussion that hopefully adds clarity to that. Well, these tend to be synthesis level or maybe analysis level questions and answers. And they're often in the form of a story, which takes, 60 to 90 minutes to go through. So my thought was that what I want to do is build a smart book on the Q&A sessions of Foundations. And then what that will give us is the boys have put together, Phil and Griff, they have done a Foundations lessons set of note sheets for every one of the recorded lessons. And I want to do the same thing for the Q&A sessions so that we now have a one-pager for each of these. There's probably 20 sessions of Q&As from the last two cohorts that I think have done a particularly good job of trying to pull together the different pieces and parts in a synthesized way. But the problem with that is that there's now about 40 hours of material for Q&A from about 100 hours of foundational lessons. And now you say, well, how do I find the synthesis, the top-level explanation of those without just listening to all of this? So what I want to have is I'm building a course map where we now have a concise set of lesson plans and notes that we can use to supplement the note sheets that go along with all these lessons. So that's this one looks to me like an advanced foundations course, or maybe it's the next part of the foundations course is to construct a very organized and efficient way of approaching this material. So if we said, hey, lesson 1 hits those keywords, lesson 1 hits those keywords, lesson 2 hits those keywords, and here's the timestamps. We now have a reference book or an index that allows us to really get into this deeply to supplement the lessons that are down there. So that's sort of the next phase of this operation. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I think you sent me an attachment with an example of one. For the life of me, I just couldn't find it. If you have it, I can take a quick look at it now. But that's in general what it is that I'm trying to do, is to take each little documented Q&A session for each of the cohorts and then produce a Cornell note sheet like this for each one of those so that we have an organized set of note sheets. Check or hold? Okay. All right, so that's everything I wanted to cover tonight. And I'm open to questions if you guys have them. But otherwise, I was going to get back to finish up the reports.
Well, I don't have anything in particular tonight, Ken. Thank you.
Okay. Lou, or Brian or Greg. I didn't see who made that last comment. Was that Lou?
Yeah, that was Lou.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it looks to me from the daily charts you're posting and whatnot, you're getting your arms around this stuff pretty nicely.
Yeah, I just wish I could trade more. I'm only
Yeah,
limited to maybe a couple days a week.
yeah. It is a irritation,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, to have systems and then to. What I would say is, the same way Brian is discovering that forex is offering opportunities that he didn't see before. It may very well be that forex gives you a way to, find open space on your calendar where you're in the right mindset and you're prepared. And it may be that some of these patterns could help you in there. But again, that's always a matter of finding a time that's appropriate in your life schedule.
yeah,
Realizing that trading is just one element of what it is that you do. So we got to right size its appearance in our life.
yeah. No, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The other
I'm
side of
not.
that too is the longer term swing trading that I'm demonstrating with the 30-minute
Mhm.
charts. That actually allows you to do some things. I think time efficiently once you kind of get your span of control down. But there are some. There's only a few times a day when you need to get in there on the 30-minute chart. And plus, you can do a lot of the processing outside of market hours to do what you want to do. So there may be something in there as well. Over.
I wanted to, Ken, this is Greg. I wanted to see if I could help. I was working on one of the videos for Foundations,
Yeah.
and I have the ability to transcribe. I have like a personal AI. It doesn't go out into the internet. It's just localized on my machine,
Right.
and it will transcribe the video. If you, I don't know if you want to pause the video here, or I'll just post it, but I can, I can
Yeah.
show you what something looks like. But the thing is, for me, it's always time. So for me to, and I don't even know if I'm smart enough to understand all the material as it is, but I can show you. Let me just post the like a PowerPoint here, and you can tell me if this would be useful to you guys. And
Sure. Go
really,
ahead.
it's the time of dissecting all that material because it's like you said, an hour and a half per video, and then really just pulling out what those parts would be.
Yeah. That's why one of the things I like to offer this to interns to work on is that I did this 25 years ago with Van's systems workshop, where I basically went through and took the timestamp notes and went through it 3 or 4 different times to find out, hey, what were the essential ideas, what was the A, B, and C material, and then rendering it into a single page, and then cutting out all the other stuff, and then reassembling the course, listening to it for completeness, adding materials to help the transition, and listening to it again. And so it ended up to be me listening to that course at a very deep level 4 or 5 different times, and it really locked in a lot of learning for me. And then I did the same thing with Griff and Phil for the Foundations course and some of the Kata 2 stuff. And them going through and listening with very close attention to detail, trying to synthesize it and summarize it, and then reviewing it again and again, really helped Griff, I think, lock in all the things that he's now teaching in the Kata 2 system. So my spider sense is that the deep personalized individual learning comes from that kind of hands-on personalized engagement, especially when you're thinking about, when you're driven by, how do I summarize this material for the maximum benefit of another human learner? And it forces you to run it through your own judgment, saying, why do I think that's A material or B material or C material? And that engagement at that level of thinking actually creates learning that lasts. The only concern I have with the AI, and I have some AI software too that can, like Fathom, that can just summarize and synthesize, is that at the end of it, I have an AI summary of the timestamps, and that's nice for a roadmap. But I don't know that it has the human emotionality or the emotional personalization of it. And one of the reasons that I offer this to the interns, as opposed to just hiring somebody for the task of giving me a timestamp, is that the personalized learning experience that is available, I don't think you can get it any other way except by driving through the material yourself. It's time consuming and a pain in the butt, but that's sort of the basis for offering it to interns as opposed to hiring a transcriber.
Yeah, got
So
got it. I don't
that's what
even
I want to say
have.
about that.
I only have the transcriber. I don't even have the meaning from
Yeah,
that. I attached the PowerPoint to
yeah,
the chat. It's in the chat room.
yeah. Let me take a look at that, and I'll see how we got. I want to compare it to the AI transcriber that I have, but that was the main idea that I wanted to express when it came to the idea of the interning. That really the personal learning benefit is more for you than for everybody else, although it actually turns out to have a really powerful benefit for somebody else. And I wanted you to be able to at least experience what it does. Is it forces you to go through that learning infrastructure that I spent the first 30 minutes talking about the levels of learning, the conscious and unconscious competence, the sense making, assessing yourself and your own understanding of things. And it really, when you try to take notes for others and try to explain what you think is important to others, you end up trying to comprehend in your own language. And it really does get you to that next level of learning, other than just simple regurgitation to trying to internalize it. The difference between level 1 and level 2 learning in that Bloom's taxonomy is that, see, a lot of times that AI is simply going to just state what it heard, and it's just going to use the same words. So there's no sense that it actually understood that unless it's using other words to explain the concept in identical meaning. That's the hardest part of that learning journey, is doing the internalization, which is what I'm talking with my military officers, and I'm trying to have them synthesize or summarize doctrine. I make them put it into their own words and into their own kind of storytelling understanding, because it requires them to use other than purely doctrinal words, and it tells me that they have internalized that idea at a root level. So that's the main idea behind it. So just some things to think about there, and I'll Brian, if that's something you want to try on, or if you find that other sheet, just send it to me, and because I tried to find it. I thought for sure you had. I just didn't have a chance.
You know,
I couldn't.
No, I had, and I sent it through. Look, I totally agree with what you're saying, Ken. Like, it was, I've only done one, and as long as I just want to make sure I'm doing it on a schedule that's of benefit to you, but it's almost selfish doing it, and in a way, because it's actually, I'm doing it for me more than I'm doing it for anyone else, and it's unbelievable what you don't understand until you actually have to put it into your own words.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what I would say on this, and it's the same thing I would say to all the interns, I'm not on any time schedule to have this book written. If I were, I'd put myself on the time schedule and get it done. I'm really more interested in locking in the learning for you, because you're doing the sweat equity. Now, I would also say that what I noticed is guys who have done this work, look at what Griff and Phil have done with producing their own courses and have helped me write a book. So there's a direct payoff to those guys. And Griff has become an amazing, practical, applied trader as a direct result of doing that. So part of me says, I don't care if anybody does it or not. It's just they're missing the chance to do it. But although I do care, I want people to experience that. But I will also tell you that Jeff Boccaccio and Bill Scheidt have done this, and you look at what they've been able to do with their PRX system and becoming fully independent professional traders themselves. I just don't know that there's a shortcut there. And Luke Crockford is doing the same thing, so I'm going to make him do this for his own course on the 5-minute Aussie. It's just one of the ways that I can be sure that the students that I want to support are actually getting it internalized. And then I also know that when we create artifacts like this, there is a payoff to other people, that they get inspired to do things, and they may learn something from somebody else's hard work too, that might give them just enough inspiration to move them to that next level of learning. So I'm trying to get leverage in that sense by producing these. So there will come a time when I just hire somebody to do this, because we're under a time pressure or whatever. But as it stands right now, I'm more interested in, if it's something you want to do, I'll check your work, and then you do it at the time schedule that makes sense to you, and it is adding value to your learning. You're under no obligation to do this. It's a learning experience that I'm always encouraging people to try on. So it may be that I hire Griff and Phil to just do this, because if they want to do this full-time professionally, now they are incentivized financially to do it, and I know that they can do it. But I'm actually not worried about that. I'm more worried about students in the foundations being able to overcome the fire hose effect of all the stuff that we're launching. So it's just a way to experience this directly. So that's what I'd say. So you're under no time pressure or obligation. So,
well, I'll send it straight through to you, but please be brutal on what you're after.
Sure. I am not afraid to give feedback. So, all right, that's everything I got for tonight. I want to wrap it up and then finish up the reports, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
take
you,
good
Ken.
care, fellas. Yep.